Hi, welcome to the new section of the course, Configuring XMPP. Then look at configuring DNS for XMPP, and lastly see how to configure the Pigeon client. So let's begin with the first video titled Installing ejabberd. In this video, we will install ejabberd and restrict access to the authentication script, and finally set up the ejabberd.cfg and restart the service. Currently, there are a number of open source XMPP Jabber server projects available with their own individual strengths and weaknesses. For this video, we're going to look at ejabberd, which is an extremely powerful and flexible option that has great online documentation. The code for ejabberd is written in Erlang, which is a language created for writing distributed, fault-tolerant code. While we will not be taking advantage of the native clustering of ejabberd, it does exist for future expansion. Now let's see how to do it. Install ejabberd through sudo apt get installed ejabberd. Restrict access to the authentication script using the commands which you are seeing on the screen. Now set up the Epam configuration using these commands. Set up etc ejabberd, ejabberd.cfg, and add these lines of code. Restart service using service ejabberd restart. Nice! Now after installing it, let's see how it works. The Buoi12 package for ejabberd provides a reasonable start for a configuration, which is well commented and provides some reasonable defaults. Rather than attempt to massage their configuration to meet our needs, we create a new configuration from scratch. While we will be discussing the options which we are configuring, we may find it helpful to also read through the stock configuration in order to learn about some of the additional options that ejabberd can provide for you. Configuring authentication. Ejabberd has the ability to tie into multiple authentication sources, including its own built-in user management service, leveraging its local database. In our case, we are going to tie ejabberd into our existing system accounts by leveraging the service's Epam authentication options. In order to leverage Epam, there are a few steps that we need to take. The first is to restrict access to the Epam helper script that actually performs the authentication attempts. This script is located in var, lib, ejabberd, priv, bin, Epam in the stock source-based install, but it has been moved to usr, lib, ejabberd, priv, bin, Epam instead in Ubuntu. We need to make sure it is set UID and restricted to just root user and the ejabberd group. The next step is to make sure that we have a Epam configuration for the ejabberd service by populating etc pam.d ejabberd. We have included an example Epam configuration, but you can write more complex rules for Epam as well. Finally, we tell ejabberd itself in ejabberd.cfg to use Epam authentication by setting. Configuring listening ports. The configuration also has a section labeled Listen, which defines the network ports that ejabberd service should listen on. The three services that we have listed have unique uses. You can choose the services you'd like to enable based upon your use case. C2S service. This section defines the C2S or client-to-server service. This is the network port that allows users to connect to your XMPP service. You'll need to make sure that this port is accessible from outside of your network if you want it to be able to connect while you're remote. You've configured the service to require start TLS and using the TLS cert and key stored in etc ejabberd ejabberd.pem. One item of note here is that ejabberd requires that your key, cert, and intermediates all be stored within the same file rather than split into separate files. The configuration also states, which means that the CS2 access control method should be applied to the service. The access control method is defined like this. This access control segment directs us to deny access to anyone who is on the admin maintain block list and allow access to everyone else. Similarly, sharper C2S_sharper directs to use the C2S_sharper rule, which is defined as you can see here. This rule allows admin users to send traffic at an unlimited rate, while restricting users to the normal rate, which is defined as 1000 bytes per second. Sharper, normal, max rate, 1000. And finally, we define the max_stanza_size, which is the maximum size in bytes of an XML stanza sent by the client. This simply limits the size of the message that you're allowed to send. S2S service. S2S uses a dial-back method for communication, meaning that your server connects to the remote server's S2S service on port 5269, which in turn triggers the remote server to connect to port 5269 on your system. The usage of two distinct TCP connections for sending and receiving messages provides additional protections against message spoofing by requiring that both sides initiate their own connection to the published DNS record for the other services. Here we define the S2S, or server-to-server inbound message service. This service handles receiving messages from other XMPP domains. It allows users for your server to communicate with users of a different XMPP server. The configuration for the S2S inbound service is a lot simpler since there's no real user setting of any sort. There's just a sharper defined and a larger max_stanza_ size. The sharper is used for the S2S service is the S2S_ sharper that maps to the fast sharper with a rate of 50,000 bytes per second. Sharper, fast, max rate 50,000. The reason for the faster limit here is that it keeps track of all server-to-server communication. This means a higher overhead per message, as well as the potential for multiple people communicating if the two servers are popular and have a number of people talking to each other. Port 5269 for the S2S server will definitely need to be accessible externally. If you do not allow the port to be accessed externally, no server-to-server messages will function. HTTP service. Port 5280 contains the HTTP service, which provides a number of pieces of functionality. HTTP_bind. This enables the HTTP bind functionality defined by XEP0206 XMPP over POSH. HTTP_poll. This enables the HTTP polling interfaces defined by XEP0025 Jabber HTTP polling. Web_admin. This service opens up a web-based admin service for your local admin users. Here's the highlighted command for it. With the exception of the web admin interface, the HTTP server component of ejabberd is used as a method to access the XMPP service over the HTTP protocol rather than serving content like a traditional web server. Specifically, it implements APIs that may be used for fully web-based XMPP clients. Opening port 5280 to the world is optional, based upon if you want to leverage any of the preceding features from outside of your network. Access control. The biggest item to look at in the access control section is the definition of the admin user. Here is where we define one or more users to be site admins. This allows them to do things like send out broadcast messages, control chat rooms, and other things. Note that it does not define the user itself. Rather, it just allows any user defined by the Jabber ID, JID, to be part of the admin group. The user itself, in our case, is defined by its existence as a local user account, so you want to make sure that your admin user is an actual system user as well. We also restrict access to the configuration and announce services to just the admin group in order to prevent other users from reconfiguring the service or sending broadcast messages. Modules. The last major piece is the modules load list, which defines what optional pieces of functionality we want to enable. Here's the highlighted code for it. We are only going to look at a couple of bigger modules here, but the rest are defined within the ejabberd installation and operations guide. Mode_mute. Mode_mute implements the multi-user chat functionality defined by XEP0045, although you may know them as chat rooms. We define a virtual hostname for the mute service, which in this case would be conference.example.com, defined as conference.athost@, in order to support servers hosting multiple domains. We also define which access control group is able to create, mute_create, manage, mute_admin, or join chat rooms, mute. The access control settings limit to local users, admin users, and all users respectively. Mod_roster. Mod_roster enables the creation of buddy groups within your chat client. This is necessary for your building a chat system, but perhaps less important if you're just using ejabberd as a general XML message passage system. Mode_announce. Mod_announce allows users on the correct access control group to send broadcast messages to all logged in users. This may be a useful feature for a small server full of trusted users, or is a potential for abuse for larger servers if it is available to more than just admins. Great! In this video, we installed ejabberd. In the next video, we will look at configuring DNS for XMPP.